See, thank you for joining me, everyone. I'm Art Pappas. I'm the founder and CEO of Bullhorn, and I want to welcome you all to this exciting panel that we have put together to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and practice as part of, this is the third webinar in our series on DEI and practice. And this one I'm excited about because this is lessons from the field. So we're going to talk about how do you apply DEI in staffing? What are some of the innovative things that companies in the space are doing, and how are they helping their customers? And then what are the challenges and internal and external? So I want to introduce my panelists here, and they're going to each give a brief introduction and share their background. But first, let's start with, we'll start with Jali. We'll start with you, Jali Cohen, and please introduce yourself and tell us, what's your job today, and what do you do, and then and share how you got into staffing too, because I think that's always interesting to all of us in the staffing industry.
Thank you, Art. So I actually do not have a history in the staffing industry. I come from previously healthcare, and then before that, fast-moving consumer goods. I recently joined the Adecco Group actually less than 6 months ago, and what drew me to the group was our mission, our overall purpose of making the future work for everyone, really focusing on driving not only engagement, but inclusion, upskilling and reskilling the population. It's no secret that that is where we're going, and I think COVID really pivoted us forward. So that is how I ended up in staffing, I was drawn to the purpose.
So brand new to the staffing industry.
Brand new. I come from the client space. So it is a very interesting shift for me, and I'm so happy I made it.
Oh, thank you for joining us today. Ian, Ian, please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background. And you aren't new to the staffing industry.
No, I'm not at all. So yes, everyone, my name is Ian Moses. I am the head of Global Inclusion and Diversity for Allegis Global Solutions. We're an RPO MSP provider in human capital solutions. And so yes, to your point, Art, I've been in the staffing industry for 19 years. Started off in recruiting on the technical side of the house, and moved into a variety of roles, business to business, where I was responsible for servicing our clients around their staffing needs. And then I so happened to land into the inclusion and diversity space roughly around 7 years ago. And so now I'm responsible for leading a global strategy around inclusion and diversity. And that ranges from supporting our own internal efforts, but also helping some of our clients with putting together human capital solutions around inclusion and diversity best practices, recruitment strategies, as well as retention strategies for contingent and full-time workers.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks also for carving out the time for us today. And then last and certainly not least, Audra Jenkins, please share with us as well. So.
Thanks, Art. It's an honor to be here today, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I am the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Randstad North America. I have 20 plus years of experience and 13 years in staffing. I joined Randstad leading diversity strategy for assigned client, book of clients, and then switched over to doing not only the external piece of it, but also the internal pieces around D&I. I was appointed as a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer in 2017. And most of this for me is evolving our D&I journey and coupling together my passion and purpose, and using my platform to make sure we leave the world better off than it was before. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, this is truly a great group, and I'm really excited about what we're going to tackle here. And so in our first two webinars, we talked about how we talked in general about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we talked about that from more of like an internal standpoint, like what are the things that staffing businesses can do to help increase their their diversity and make their workplaces more inclusive. And this time, well, what I wanted to focus on is the external view, because there's an opportunity for staffing firms, and many of you know this, and you're doing this already, which is that it's not just about, okay, I can certainly focus on my own workforce, but I can also, being in staffing, we are very much consultants to our clients around their workforce. There's this big opportunity. And I think especially now, given what we went through this summer, there's been an awakening, and you have like almost every employee asking executives, what are we doing about DE&I? What are we doing about diversity in this organization? You have customers asking, where do you stand? What do you stand for? Holding brands accountable. And I think executives are paralyzed. Like, I know that most tech, we were talking about this a little bit before the webinar starts, most tech CEOs are really struggling with diversity because there's a lack of people that are of diverse backgrounds in engineering, and specifically in software engineering and programming. And so there's a lot of focus now, a lot of attention. It's sort of like, okay, what's the opportunity for a staffing firm? Like, I'd love to hear, and maybe we'll start with you, Audra. Like, where do you see clients needing help and asking for help from a staffing firm when it comes to DEI?
Thank you for that, Art. I think we're uniquely positioned, as my colleagues have, both Jolly and Ian have said, we're uniquely positioned to help with that because we're in the human capital business. I mean, that's what we do every day. We put hundreds of thousands of people to work globally from all of our respective firms. And I think that we know where to go to find diverse talent. I think that's the first piece of it. I think the other piece of it is helping clients to understand the need, not only the brand impact, but the revenue impact of not having that diverse talent in place. It's going to impede them from getting new business. It's going to, we are looking at a different type of worker. As we look at the gig workers, looking at millennials, and then, the Generation Z, they want to work at companies that care about things, things that are matter to them, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think the other piece of it is for staffing companies, is the GDP, the larger GDP, and the implications of it. Harvard Business Review put out an article about the female economy. Women control roughly $20 trillion of the global economy in consumer spending. So if we're in a services business, staffing is, then we need to look at these other women-owned or women-driven platforms or other diversity-owned platforms and see how can we align? How can we go out and get bigger business when we don't have the basics of things that they consider important, including diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Now, Ian, do your clients say, okay, Allegis, help me with this? Or do they say, Allegis, I got this. I have somebody like Audra and Ian and Jolly internally who are helping me, so leave me alone. How do your...
Yeah, no, and while they have, I don't know if they have amazing people like Audra and Jolly, but they do have individuals leading their inclusion and diversity efforts. But yes, they are looking for partners to be able to help with some of those other attraction areas. Clients for a very long time have wanted to capture supplier spend, and they still do, but that has now shifted. Clients want suppliers to increase diversity hiring, predominantly around women and your ethnic minority groups. They want assurance that their suppliers have designed recruiting strategies to cast a wide net so that their job openings come to the attention of a lot of qualified candidates, all qualified candidates, including women and racial ethnic minorities. And like I said, while spend has always been desirable, clients are now wanting more reporting capabilities to know how their interview to hire ratios look. They want to also be able to see and measure the outcomes via some sort of monthly or quarterly reporting scorecard. So there are so many different asks of clients around, diversity needs. And so it is expanding, and it is important for staffing companies to continue to expand their offerings.
Now, are they asking for that reporting piece? Are they saying, help me measure my own efforts broadly, or just from the perspective of like what's going on with you as my supplier?
Yeah, I would say primarily through the contingent workforce, right? You know, a lot of these companies, it's obvious why companies use staffing firms to supplement their hiring needs. So being the experts in this attraction and recruitment strategy space, naturally it's an expectation that firms are leading the way with these solutions and best practices and technology recommendations that allow companies to diversify the talent pool. So primarily the focus is around the contingent workforce, but absolutely giving those best practices and those recommendations and suggestions so that they can apply some of those things to their own internal hiring as well.
Interesting. So what about Adecco, Jolly? Are they doing the same thing too? It sounds like there's a trend developing here.
So I would say yes on the staffing piece. And we also offer on the upskilling and reskilling side, we see that really targeting and trying to focus to make sure we're preparing the diverse workforce. We also see it on coaching opportunities. I think we see it on our end-to-end HR solutions, not just on staffing, but the overall product suite that we have. Another area, and I know that Ian and Audra and I talked about this on a separate discussion, the RFPs, whether it be for RFPs that we're submitting or RFPs that our clients are submitting to, wanting to say that their contingent workforce is also diverse, is a huge part that I think the staffing firms could also contribute to.
So explain that to me. So your end client, so like let's say it's a Pfizer, for instance, when they go to submit RFPs on their own, they want to know their client wants to know that their suppliers are
diverse. Wow. And supporting a diverse workforce. Absolutely.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't even think of that. That's an interesting angle. And so what are the range of solutions? Does it like start and end with, okay, we can supply diverse talent, or does it go deeper than that? You know, diverse talent and give statistics, or do you sometimes find that clients want you to engage at a deeper level? Anybody can jump in on that.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. that would be the perfect scenario, but you do have to dive in deeper than just, hey, okay, poof, magically diverse talent appears. If it was that easy, you know, we wouldn't have these challenges. I think it's more and more where clients want to know, you know, what training are suppliers providing to their recruiters to help them to eliminate that bias that can kind of creep into the recruitment process. You know, how well do suppliers use inclusive language when they're posting and advertising the open positions that they have for these different clients? And then what are suppliers doing to your point earlier of attracting their own diverse workforce? Are you asking all men to attend conferences like Grace Hopper or Women in Technology to recruit female consultants? Do you have a diverse workforce within your own organization? So there's a lot of things that lead up to the end result. And so those are just a few, and there's many more, but I don't want to steal them all.
I would also chime in to say, Ian, just piggybacking on what you're saying, is that we see that as we bid for business as well, they want to know what we're doing in our workforce. How are we educating and training folks? How are we going about making sure that we are creating an inclusive process? How are we sourcing candidates? What are our screening questions? What are the upskilling questions when we bring on talent? How are we making sure that they're clear and that they are supporting an inclusive environment? So I think as Ian says, it goes very deep, and it's not just a one-trick pony. It's several different layers that it depends on the client, it depends on the situation that people are looking for.
So interesting. So they'll engage you to do more than just help me find talent. They'll say, okay, help me streamline my process. Maybe my interview process is broken. What about post, post hire? And we talk a lot about, okay, I fill the top of the funnel with some great people. I somehow managed to hire them. They join the company and it's totally not an inclusive environment. And I have to imagine, you're all nodding, right? Like, have to imagine this is a common occurrence. Do clients ever allow you to consult around that? Or is it sort of like, hey, once they're onboarded, you're just there to, to replace them when they don't work out?
So I can jump in there, Art. I would say, just to piggyback on what both Ian and Jelly just said, I would say that from a holistic perspective, we have to look at everything from not only from the recruitment, that's only one arm of diversity, equity, inclusion. We have to look at what is the culture, what is the training, what are the repercussions for a person? Do they feel like they're providing safe spaces for people? I mean, there's a lot of different things we do. I'll give an example. A client asked me to come in and do a leadership roundtable. I've done a lot of these internally after the George Floyd killing to talk about navigating discussions on race in the workplace or navigating diverse, tough conversations. And that was very eye-opening. The client just said, hey, we don't know what to do. A very large client. You would think they would, I would have thought they would have known, been a very large client, but just because they're a large client doesn't mean they have the resources in place and they haven't really evolved their D&I journey. They may just be doing the basic things and just getting by. So having those leaper, they want to have a third party to come in, offer that expertise, figure out what they can do, what can they say. And I think the challenge is, for them, they're looking to leverage our expertise. We have deep knowledge. We have a broad base of clients.
From you, I could see saying, hey, let's hire some D&I consultants, but they will take a staffing supplier, and of course a workforce management supplier, right? They'll take that and say, yeah, okay, I see you as the expert.
Absolutely, because you have to look at, all of us, all our respective businesses, both Ian and Jolly and Ronstadt, we have a diversity clause in all our contracts. I mean, that's all of us. We always have some diversity related clause in the US in our contracts with our business. So they use that clause to say, okay, you can support my diversity effort. So why don't you come and do X, Y, and Z? So there's an opportunity there. Or it could be hiring manager training. Maybe the hiring managers don't understand, their role in the D&I journey of an organization. They're the hand that rocks the cradle. We can provide diverse talent all day long, but the hiring manager doesn't hire them, then nothing's ever going to change. So something's broken in the process.
And they'll
so
give you access to the hiring managers for that purpose. Whereas
Absolutely.
if you said, hey, I see this rec just went in the VMS, I want to go talk to the hiring manager, they'd say, no way. But this is is this an angle for an account manager to say, okay, put me in front of all your hiring managers because I want to talk about how I can help you with this other thing. I think it's a huge opportunity, right? To get account managers in front of those hiring managers, right?
I think the biggest opportunity is a lot of times, especially the smaller staffing firms, if they don't know what to do or where to start, then their clients most likely don't know what to do or where to start. So they can bring someone in as outside consultant to give them some great expertise and provide, like you're doing here, Art, a great webinar to give people some great best practices and tips. And the clients will be drawn to that, like flies to honey, because everybody's craving more data, more information around this topic because they're accountable for it internally, whether they are a line of business leader or whether they are dealing with talent acquisition together. So it doesn't have to necessarily be there, because you're a contingent, labor provider, that you don't have the expertise. You may be more evolved and have better expertise than, maybe even an external consultant because you have a broad base of clients to pull that knowledge from. So I think we're uniquely positioned to do that.
That's huge. Jelly, you're nodding your head too. Looks like.
I was just going to say, just following up with what Ozra is saying, you also see some that are proactive so that they are aware that they don't have that environment. They may have high turnover with diverse contingent talent, and they want you to come in, do an assessment to understand what do we need to do differently. And this is not something necessarily a D&I consultant would be the best person to come in. You really want the person that's speaking to the talent that's turning over to say, what can we do differently? What do you recommend? Where do we go to find this talent? What do we need to do differently with our hiring managers? So they are asking you to come in because they have identified that it is an issue as well. So it doesn't just have to be in response to, some are proactive.
And will they say, here's a list of all the contractors that have come and gone in the last, here you go. Here's some great leads. I see where my mind goes.
Yes. No, I don't see that. I think it is that your account managers have to have a pulse on what's happening with those particular clients, and they will partner with them. But it's not always reactive. Sometimes it is proactive.
Yeah, that's cool. Ian, you look like you might have wanted to add something.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, it's a multi-pronged approach. One size fits all is not the answer. I've seen companies say, well, what job board can I go to I wish it was just that easy. Like this takes work, and this takes intentionality, and it also takes time. This isn't something that has been broken in 30 days, so it's not going to be fixed in 30 days. So it takes a commitment level from a time perspective, an investment perspective, a financial investment as well, to really be able to see progress over, not a short period of time, but a long period of time. So we look at it as the long game. I think it's so important that, staffing firms set and establish realistic, data-driven expectations for what that available pool of talent looks like, right? Certain skill sets in specific locations, even in the same geographic regions, making those appropriate benchmarks for measuring diversity will differ depending on the types of jobs that you're considering. So there's a lot of different prongs that you have to look at. And I think the beauty of working with a company like Audra's and Jolly's is that we're just a sharing community. If you ever work with D&I practitioners, I just had a chance to attend the CEO Action Pledge last week, and it's just a sharing of information. That's probably why I enjoy it so much. While we are still competitors, we're willing to share because we're all striving for the same goal. And so it's incumbent upon these companies to leverage companies like us to come in and partner with them to really figure out what are the best solutions. Maybe it's an ERG event, maybe it's a open house, maybe it's something that can attract a more diverse workforce, but we have to explore all the ways because no one has it figured out.
So you think so let me put my skeptical hat on now, and I'll pretend I'm the owner of a staffing business or the CEO or, maybe the head of account management or recruitment. Being skeptical, this all sounds good to talk about D&I for my customer, but is there really revenue there for me if I focus on it with my customer? Or is it just sort of nice, fluffy stuff and makes the customer feel good, but they're not committed and or is there real revenue opportunity? I'm just curious. And I think I know the answer, but.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. There's absolutely a real revenue opportunity for any of these firms to stand themselves apart from their competitors, to fulfill a business need that their customer is in dire need of help. You've seen all of the commitments that have taken place over the past 6 months and an increase to want to hire and attract more diverse workforce. And so these firms play a part in those commitments and helping these organizations to get there. So huge value add when you can find the right potent mix of being able to deliver talent, but also delivering diverse talent.
So a lot of executives made promises about diversity this summer that they're having trouble backing up now. And there's an opportunity there.
There's an opportunity.
I would say one of the reasons I think we all paused is we feel like we're way past the discussion of, is there value,
Yes.
is there revenue? That may have been our hesitation.
Yeah, okay.
We are in the running. I cannot imagine a staffing firm today that is not bombarded with requests for diverse talent in almost every possible industry. I think our challenge is keeping up with the demands of the client to deliver. It is not that as a staffing firm that it's not there and that we don't see the increased revenue and the increased interest. I think we're past that point.
So just to jump in there to piggyback on what Jolie just said, me and my team, we're 70-80% client facing and sales focused. So that should give you an idea. If we're spending 70-80% of our time on the external facing pieces in sales, then you know there's a high demand for it. And I can tell you, since this year dealing with these double pandemics, not only of the COVID-19 but also the social justice movement, that has amped up exponentially for our team. So we all are feeling it, and if it was easy, then anybody would do it. That's why you hire experts like Ian and Jolie and myself to provide that strategic direction, but not only execution. Bill Gates said it better, best. Vision without execution is daydreaming. You can talk all day long about D&I, but if you're not going to walk the talk, then you don't need to be talking about it anymore, because people are going to hold you accountable for that.
So that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask about. So what are the internal challenges that you hit when, okay, you pitch the client and say, okay, let's go help you with this effort. And then now you have to implement, there are external challenges, there are internal challenges. What are the challenges that come up when you go to try to execute?
Can jump in there. I think on the client side, I think the first obstacle is indifference. Sherm put out a study that said that 33% of companies believe their diversity is sufficient. They think they're doing enough. So I think the indifference piece is one of it. I think the second piece of it is unclear vision and executable plans. If you don't have clear vision about it, it's hard to build a solution for something that you don't quite know what you're needing. So I guess having those strategic conversations, direction on understanding assessment of where you are today and where you need to be or where you should be or where you're trying to get to in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road. I think that's the first piece of it. I think the other thing is lack of diversity of your team. If you're a staffing firm, you're trying to go out and land a big company and you're saying you can help them with diversity, but you have no diversity yourself. I think that is a huge miss on your part and an easy fix and a good investment to make. Fix your own house before you go try to build someone else's house. So I think that's, the three things I would say are some of the obstacles for companies, but also internally why companies are not successful. They don't think they have a problem.
And
Yeah,
if I could jump in on that, just to support what Audra was saying, to go back to the first piece, that is actually one of the opportunities when you go in and you can help your clients build their strategy, because they don't know, they don't have that insight. They're not aware. And you have to bring, as Ian mentioned, data to the discussion as well. So mirroring, packaging both the data and the discussion and helping them build their strategy eases, I think, that transition. But again, I do want to go back to the demand is so strong at this moment. Those obstacles, I think, are not as strong as they were, let's say, 12 months ago.
So Audra mentioned the internal challenge. Do you feel like that's a barrier, that if you don't, as a supplier, don't have a diverse workforce, is it hard to recruit a diverse workforce for your customer?
I think if you're transparent, Art, I don't think so. I think that if you're transparent and say, hey, we recognize we have an opportunity here. We're looking to bring in that diverse talent to help elevate that conversation and dialogue. But you also have to be authentic. I mean, you can't be checking boxes. You can't be using tokenism to say, hey, I've got my one diverse person, my one woman, my one veteran, one LGBTQIA plus person, and one disabled person. I'm good to go. That's not how it works. I mean, you really need to be very serious and thoughtful about, do I have enough diversity to be representative of society as a whole and to be effective as a supplier? Because if you don't have that, then you don't need to be in the game, because your competitor is going to blow you out of the water. You've already lost before you started. So make sure you have an authentic, purpose-driven DEI strategy. mission and values, and that you're living out those that is aligned to your business strategy. Because if you're not, then you're going to fail anyway. Because you can talk all day long. I tell people all the time. It's so funny how many people come out and say, "Oh, now we're doing diversity, we're doing that." See, you've got the real people that's in the trenches every day, and we know it's not easy work. You can't just jump in from being a mechanic one day and now you're a diversity practitioner. It doesn't work that way. I mean, this is blood, sweat, and tears. This is our livelihood. We've lived and dream, and experienced over many years to get where we are. So it's not something that if it was that easy, then everybody would do it and we would have no problems at all. So I think you got to make sure that if you need to be able to back up what you're saying. If you're going out to saying you're going to sell something, then be able to back it up with actual plans and be able to execute on that and follow through.
Right, right. So, Ian, you came up on as a recruiter. I'd love to hear your perspective on the challenges that you run into.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at my years of recruiting and then even being dedicated into the diversity recruitment space, it was obvious that there were companies who had been doing this for quite some time. And so you're up against that. So you have companies who've made this investment, and I think Audra spoke to this best. It's a long-term, multi-year journey. It won't happen overnight. So those were some of the challenges when I, first jumped into the space. It was like, okay, all right, I'm a Black guy, I can compete, right? I can find diversity. But realizing that there were other organizations who had put a lot of that blood, sweat, and tears into it for many years. And so having to continue to carry that forward, right? I'm now able to see the fruits of those labors, pay off huge dividends, but you don't see it immediately. And that's one of the things that staffing firms that are coming in now, they want instant gratification, or, they're looking at it as a flavor of the month. But in order to really see the benefit to this, you're going to have to make a consistent investment. You're going to have this, ongoing maintenance and development in this strategy in order to see those results. So as a recruiter, I didn't see it out the gate. I struggled out the gate because it was, it's hard. And there were other companies who had made those investments. But over time, having been in this space now for 6 or 7 years, I know what organizations can do what. I know where to go find those different pools of talent. I know how to, change the language to speak to certain audiences that we're trying to attract. But that didn't happen in year 1 or year 2.
Can I call out something that I think both Audra and Ian are alluding to as well is, and Ian said it best, just because I am a person of color does not mean I am a diversity expert. This is a skill set. So I am currently recruiting for that diversity expert at the executive level because I'm looking for the depth of knowledge and that experience. This is not something just because someone is diverse that they are a diversity expert. This requires skill, this requires understanding the strategic piece. And I think for staffing firms, as they go out and look, please do not just look for that diverse talent, look for the depth of knowledge and experience as well. So I think just to make sure that that's clear in that divide.
Sort of a naive thing, right? To be like, oh, well, this person I'll ask them all my questions about diversity because, yeah. Is it it's interesting. So, I think about the staffing industry, having been in the industry now for 20 years plus. And, the industry has, I would say there's on the recruiter ranks and the salesperson ranks, there's always been good sort of male-female diversity. Executive level, not so much, sort of boardroom level, C-suite. That's hopefully starting to shift. And you see that with like, some of the awards that SIA does. And we just came out with the Power 150. Are we seeing, is it getting easier to attract diverse talent into staffing, a staffing business, to be recruiters, to be account managers? Is that getting easier than it had been?
I don't don't think the issue is at the entry level or the, that's not where it is. It's the manager and senior leader above, like, Jelly just alluded to there. That's where the challenge is, Art, because to get to that level, they want you to have so many years of staffing experience. They want you to have some level of the industry experience. And if you don't develop that talent internally, a couple things we've done is first, we have an executive diversity council. So we are looking holistically who set goals for us, each line of business owner for diversity. And then we're basically going through that scorecard every quarter to see where they are. So if you're having to present in front of the CEO and you haven't moved the needle any, then the CEO is looking at you as an ineffective leader, I would imagine. So I think having those, driving that accountability there at the top level. I think the other piece of it is we've got a sponsorship program to develop high potential diverse talent internally. So that program is helping us to, they're mentored by a C-suite person. So if you're mentored by someone, because if you're unknown, you're unpromoted. So you've got to make sure that the C-suite knows diverse talent and their potential so that they can move diverse talent to a higher level. But if you don't even know who your diverse talent is and the high potentials that exist in your organization because they're hidden under a mid-level manager or maybe they're at the recruiter level or individual contributor level, then it's very difficult for you to move the needle. So a lot of times it's really homegrown could be, the opportunity there.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I can't think of many of all the staffing and recruiting professionals I know. I can't think of anybody I've met that's in a senior leadership position that says, like you all have come in from like outside the industry, but like somebody to run a branch, it's almost always like I start like, Ian's story is like, Ian, you could be a branch, leader, but, run the whole, maybe an entire country for a staffing firm. But coming in from the outside, like you almost never hear like, oh yeah, I was in a totally different sales industry. Nobody goes from like, I was selling software or pharmaceutical, I was a pharma rep, to I'm running a branch, right? You have to start at the entry level and work your way up. And so that's an interest. It makes for a very slow, trickle up process for diversity, right?
Yeah. But I think you have to, and it depends on your business model and of course the organization that you're with, but I can say we are looking at that as also what I would call professional diversity, to say, are these transferable skills? Are you able to take other industries? So let's say you're not in sales and staffing, you come from another area. Can we put you in those roles? Because the reality is, Art, to your point, it would take forever. And we would not see that needle moved. Diversity.
Right, C-level executives in 15 years, right?
Yes. And I think that in order to move that needle, you have to be intentional and you have to really be open to professional diversity. So going outside of what you know to be successful and really being open in this industry is key.
That is bold.
Yeah.
That's who we are, absolutely.
And you see more companies putting a focus on this and because of the need. And so, one of the things that we've introduced is focusing on core competencies of what it needs to be at that C level or that VP or director level. And by, focusing on what those core competencies are versus a person's body of work, you can really see whether or not that person possesses the skills in order to be at that level or in that position, and not just saying, oh, you have this lovely resume and all these years of experience, whereas, someone, a female who took time, to have kids or raise their children may not have the same depth of experience, but does that mean she doesn't have the same competencies as a VP or an executive? So really focuses on the competencies versus the body of work is one way that we can continue to move the needle in being able to identify that leadership level talent versus using some of the same networks or systems that we've used in the past.
Do you see, are there industries where somebody could drop in from another industry and be, say, a regional vice president of a staffing division? I'm going to run the Northeast for Allegis or Adecco or Randstad. Could I come from another industry? Have you seen other industries where the skills are semi-transferable?
I think it's a business to business. You've done B2B consultative work and sales. And I think that, to me, if you have that skill set, that's really where the strength lies in the staffing industry, that B2B consultative experience in sales. So if you can do those two things, I think you can figure out the industry piece of it and bring that skill set over. And we've hired people from PwC, from Deloitte, a lot of the consulting firms because they have that
Mhm.
B2B and also that sales and that hunger for the sales. But then you have to look at other non-traditional roles in staffing. I mean, not everybody in staffing is doing staffing. There's CHROs or CFOs. I mean, there's opportunities for you to grow your C-suite in an indirect way without having that adjacent experience. You have to look at, is that an opportunity? The biggest roles, we just changed CHROs and he comes from the business. So bringing people in that are diverse, that do different things, I think that's an opportunity there as well. You don't have to always be, in the staffing branch. You can do something that's related to supporting staffing, whether it's finance or tech, something else to bring that C-suite level, elevate the C-suite level in diversity.
And I think you too want to make sure that you're inclusive as an organization. That's the next key is like, okay, when you are going to go get someone externally, from another industry or, that wasn't homegrown, how inclusive is your environment to embrace that individual? Or do they continue to feel like an outsider because they weren't brought up through the farm or through the system? So I think the inclusion aspect of organizations has to continue to evolve and improve in order for, organizations to be accepting of individuals who come from those other industries or those other companies with tenured experience. So inclusion within your organization, not only for the people that work there, but people who aren't, that we would consider outsiders.
Yeah, it's a good point, Ian, because you think about a lot of the most successful staffing businesses have really strong corporate cultures. And sometimes that culture can be interwoven with like almost like there's like a corporate climate and corporate culture, and those two things can be separated, right? Like culture is how we behave, and then but I think sometimes there's like, oh, we're hard charging and it's all about sales and we talk a certain way and everybody, like there's we blast loud music or something like that. And that could really be a non-inclusive environment, right? And so I think it's a challenge for the industry to say what parts of my culture are core to what makes us great and what's not all that important. And what could we live without if we wanted to create a more inclusive environment? I think it's hard for people.
Yeah, you want to avoid the environment becoming the first four letters of culture. And I'll leave that there for people to think about.
That's good. So I know we have some questions coming in. I want to make sure we have time. This is great. So let's see, we got a bunch of questions here. I'll start with, so here's a good one. I think, how do you measure progress, right? Like if you're trying to drive an effort to help your customers with diversity, maybe even two questions, right? How do you measure progress internally and how do you measure it externally? Am I helping my clients with diversity? Am I making progress on that or not? And am I moving the needle internally on my own diversity efforts? Would love thoughts on that. So Jolly, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I will tell you, we are definitely begun our journey. So I can speak for the past 6 months as we have started to measure quite a few things. One of the things that we're looking at, and I'll speak internally, is our retention and promotion of our diverse talent. Are we moving the needle? Are they staying? So that goes to the discussions that were happening earlier, is when you bring people on, is your culture inclusive? Like, are they staying? Are you promoting them? Are your surveys showing, like, are these people engaged? do they feel like they're valued and a part of the organization? So I would say one is you can look at also your retention rates, and two, we also look at surveys to see what is the actual feedback our colleagues are giving us.
Yeah. To add to what Jolly just said, so for us, it's measuring progress internally is driven by our Executive Diversity Council. So we have those specific measurements and a scorecard that we're looking at, including, you know, our engagement scores, looking at our diversity of slate to hiring managers. You know, did they have a diverse slate when they were considering candidates to fill internally, and did they actually hire diverse talent? So looking at not only the slate but also the hires, the outcomes of that. Then we're also looking at the sponsorships, you know, how many of our senior executives are sponsoring high potential diverse talent. We're also looking at, you know, looking for the promotional opportunities where we are, you know, going out and trying to find an opportunity for that diverse talent when in that sponsorship program. It's really about getting them to the next level and the next opportunity and giving them the education and tools and skill sets so they can get there. So I think that's one of the things that we're really focusing on. And then finally, I think for us from a metric, we are definitely looking at from a client perspective, you know, we have scorecards, all of us do on diverse talent. We're looking at not only the diverse slates, but also the impact. You know, did we make an impact on one hiring manager or one department or one, you know, area? And then we use those wins to kind of go into other areas and say, hey, this is what worked for this area of this company or that client. It's also helped to drive our revenue. We've had a client that had, for example, 50-50 slate requirement, 50% gender, 50% diversity. And as a result of meeting and exceeding those goals, we were able to expand our business. So we were able to gain revenue. So as we get those quick wins, sharing those stories, it's proof of concept that it works, the strategic direction of our diversity team and efforts. I think those solutions help us from a revenue perspective.
That's great. The 50-50 slate is definitely a winner. We've seen that in our own business where once we moved to that, all of a sudden the new hires started to really shift, which, because before, if you didn't, you know, and it's a good way to do a quota without forcing unnatural hiring decisions, I think. Here's a good one. As a staffing company, do you capture diversity information in a candidate's profile, and what are the risks with that?
So legally you can't. I mean, all of us, all big three that's on here, we're all federal contractors, so we're subjected to OFCCP. So we don't capture that information there. You've got to be mindful of the Department of Labor laws. So I think that's one thing. I think what we do too, I think a lot of us, you know, we're trying to figure out where's the safest place to ask that question from a legal perspective. And it really is not if it's a contingent labor, it's not before they are placed in the role, because there's a lot of risk for the staffing company there. I think where you solicit the data is after they've been placed. Go back and say, hey, we're trying to build out, you know, a diverse community or a diverse talent pool, and we want to make sure that, you know, if you want to sign up and be part of it, you're voluntarily able to provide that information. So we can't solicit that data prior to none of the big three firms here, because we're all federal contractors and there's a lot of legality there. I can't speak to the smaller firms, but typically none of us will do that. You know, we will target that diverse talent. We will provide diverse pools, but, you know, we're not going to be reporting or asking them to, you know, give that information out in a CRM tool or anything like that, like Bullhorn, of course. We would not put Bullhorn at risk.
Well, I know that, and I remember building back 10 years ago or 15 years ago when this came up, somebody said, I need to be able to capture equal opportunity data and demographic data, but I don't ever want it exposed in a search interface, you know, 1, 2, or for recruiters to see on the profile. So there are fields in Bullhorn that aren't exposed visibly to the recruiter, but then you can go run a report and say, well, how many diverse candidates, you know, did we place and things like that. But you're right, it is risky because, you know, even just asking the question, somebody can say, okay, like I was asked this question, what did they do with that information? I'm curious, Ian and Jolly, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very important to avoid risk when you can. And so All of that information is voluntarily given by the candidate. And so what you use that information for is can put you at risk. Is the recruiter using it to increase the slate of diverse candidates that they're submitting for a particular opening? Is a hiring manager only looking at women for a particular role, right? These things and these practices put a company, a staffing firm, and the actual end client at any risk of discriminatory recruitment practices. So we want to avoid those things at all costs. There are some other ways that you can potentially capture that information, but who has visibility into that information is probably key. And I would definitely advise any staffing firm on this call to work with their legal counsel to ensure that they're not putting themselves at risk of any of those discriminatory recruitment practices.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because anytime you go to legal, they're like, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, you don't even talk about that. Please mark this email attorney-client privilege. But at the end of the day, you have to somehow measure, right? And I like the idea of post-placement saying, okay, let's see how we did. Of course, that doesn't give you the insight into the interview slate, which I do think, it is hard. I think it's particularly challenging, right? Like if you can't ask the question on the front end of the recruitment process, but yet you're trying to move the needle for your customer or even on your own internal hiring, it's hard. It's really hard. And then what you get is like recruiters trying to, write it down on a piece of paper. How am I doing on this job, right?
So Art, I think you just made the case not only with the questions, but the answers on the importance of having a skilled and experienced D&I expert on your team. So you have legal on one side providing you this advice, and I always say, listen to legal. So I'm going to throw that caveat out there. But on the other side, you have the long-term knowledge base and the experience of your D&I expert to help you navigate on how to achieve what the client is looking for, how to achieve what you need to deliver. And that's where I keep going back to this, the value of having that experience in your D&I expert is invaluable. So they can translate whatever legal is telling you, all of the compliance issues, but then what are possible solutions to help you achieve?
Yeah, that's good advice. So here's another question. And somebody asked, earlier you stated sometimes the bigger issue is with a client that wants to do D&I, but they are not set up internally to really do it successfully. Do you vet those clients before engaging, or do you have another service to help them get set prior to hiring? That's a good question. Like if the client's saying, oh, I really want to improve my diversity, but then they make like all sorts of crazy comments that lead you to believe that it's just not going to work, right?
Yeah, you have to evaluate that. I would love to be able to say that there aren't some companies that are checking a box. I would love to be able to just say, yeah, everybody is doing it with the right intent. And so I think that's part of the evaluation process when you're working with a customer, to really be able to understand, how serious are they? What type of investment are they willing to make? How long have they been invested in this? What financial investments are they willing to make? Because usually we put our money where our mouth is. So I think it's important to continue to vet through what that involvement looks like and what that commitment looks like. Because if you do run into someone who's just checking a box, it can be frustrating. You can drive yourself crazy trying to, and I've been there, trying to provide diversity for a client, and that's not really what they wanted, So it's important to vet through this, obviously push back, be able to arm your recruiters with the right capabilities to be able to help mitigate their bias through the recruiter continuum cycle. But if you keep on hitting a brick wall, at some point you may have to just call it what it is.
Yeah. Or you might want to think about one approach could be a step approach. Maybe year one is giving them some basic policies, awareness, training, best practices. Year two could be, okay, let's evolve your strategy, talk about your diverse talent. Year three could be, we've got your diverse talent in the door. Let's talk about how you can keep them and build your culture. So I think you can look at it as an opportunity, depending on the size of client it is and the willingness of them to listen, but also execute on the plan and strategy that you present. So, you can look at it both ways, but I agree with Ian, some things, we have tons of clients who want our help. I think you can't put your energy and effort in clients that don't. So if they really do want help and they really do want to change and grow, I think they've got, between our three companies, the expertise definitely to get there.
Yeah, that's great, helpful. One last question, and this is a good one, but we got 4 minutes. We'll see if we can cover it. So it said, regarding retention, do you think that a commitment to transparency around equal pay for employees in the same position should be in place? Massachusetts has some legislature about this, where you can no longer ask people what they're making, and there's some good steps there. We are aware, and that was me interjecting in the middle of this good question, sorry. So we are aware that there is a national pay gap between different racial and ethnic groups, as well as gender and sexuality pay gaps. How do you propose we tackle that issue? We already have discussed the importance of an accepting culture, but I feel the importance of pay and retention is often overshadowed and not discussed.
So I can add to that. So we've committed, Randstad US, to the Equal Pay International Coalition at the UN a couple of years ago. I was able to attend the UN pre-COVID to make that pledge. So I think that you have to do pay assessments in your organization, but you have to dig deeper and look at, are you paying your diverse talent less than you're paying your non-diverse talent? I think you got to look at that, do that other second tier pay analysis assessment. I think the third thing too is, do you have language around being committed to equal pay? I think you got to be able to not just have the words written there, but you actually have to be, these are the steps we're doing to ensure that we have equal pay. We're looking at market analysis. We're looking at, our competitors. We're looking at, where, what's posted on different websites. A lot of people are posting pay ranges from at least our clients are. So I think you got to have that holistic approach around that. I'm very passionate. Most people know, if you ever heard me speak about this, this is like the thing I'm most passionate about is equity and pay equity. So it's, I still don't understand why the World Economic Forum says that it's going to be 100 years before we get to gender pay parity from a global perspective. So, we own this. I think corporations, I think companies, you can control this. You can find it. We find money for all sorts of things. If we can't find money to pay the people that are most valuable to our organization and closest to our clients, then we're doing a disservice to our business and a disservice to ourselves.
Yeah, I'm with you, Audra. Equity is what it's all about at the end of the day, and we try to grapple around, how do we fix social injustice? Well, providing equitable opportunities for all people is a start. And so to your point, right, we control this and we can influence it. I was doing some research on a client that we are getting ready to work with, and it posted publicly, their focus on pay equity amongst women and people of color. And it was at 99 cents to the dollar of what a male makes. So if you're serious about it, publicly put it out there. That means you're making a stance, because to me that was eye-opening, and it made that company more attractive because of the fact that they're willing to commit to something like that.
That's a cool idea. I like that. Jolly, do you have anything to add? I'll give you the last word.
No, I agree as always with Audra and Ian. And I think not only are these great points, but it's the focus. It's where we're going. It's the baseline is pay equity. I think that, again, I go back to, at this point, I don't think that those are the discussions anymore. Our clients are asking for, they're asking us, what are the policies? What are the procedures? And for any staffing firms on this call that still feel like they're battling that, I agree with Audra 100%. The demand is so great right now. you almost can pick and choose at this point who you're working with and those really committed to moving the D&I message forward.
Well, this was a truly fantastic discussion. I just want to thank all three of you for taking the time and sharing your thoughts. And you're also thoughtful and really passionate and dedicated to what you do. And it's really great, and great representatives of the staffing industry too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right.